Okay,
Yeah.
we're live. Oh God, no, did it wrong again. All right, we had a couple weeks off because we've been busy. I was at the Open Hardware Summit in Montreal, which was incredible, and I'm sure some of the things that I learned there will influence maybe some of the things that we work on or even talk about today. And
Yeah.
I know you've been busy, Kelly, but you're back.
Yeah. I was in New York, gave a commencement speech at Parsons for the design and technology kids. That was awesome.
So we've had a couple weeks off. Hopefully people had a chance to catch up on any episodes that they missed. But we're back now and we're ready to talk about, what are we ready to talk about, Kelly?
So, we're continuing with the theme of how to integrate AI into hardware so artists can use AI in embedded forms, right? So not just like on your computer for screens, for screen graphics, but for robotics would be like the obvious example that people know, but there's just so much more beyond robotics. So let's say sculpture, right? For starters, or wearables. I know I really want to use colored light more in my work. So while you can think of colored light as being a screen, you can also think of it as just being like a movable painterly element that you can add to whether it's a painting surface, or in my case, I do artistic circuits, and I love to have the lights flowing through them, and I want to place them strategically. And then you can have other physical elements involved, right? So that's why the hardware approach is so appealing to me. And you can control the shape of the LED and et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, so we've been, talking about how can we integrate AI into these hardware controllers, because I've certainly done that with other forms of hardware, Arduino, and also in my case, a lot of analog electronics. But it occurred to me in the time we had off that what I really want more than anything, and I asked this question of David, and he's had a little bit of time to think about it, but we wanted to dig into like how soon and how can I have AI on hardware where I, as the artist, can just talk to the AI in an interactive way, like I would with ChatGPT now, and tell it, like, I want you to animate these, let's say, 20 by 20 LEDs, and make it look like an undulating wave pattern with ocean colors. Okay, so, and it might not get it right the first time, but can I do that? How soon? I mean, I know AI can write code, but like, how soon can I have something like that?
Yeah, and I don't know how much time I've had to think about it. I think we were talking about this maybe about midnight last night. So I certainly haven't had a chance to.
No, it's not fair. It's not fair, but whatever. Here we are.
I haven't had a
Life
chance to.
isn't fair, David.
Yeah. But it was just really interesting because the stuff that you mentioned, it happened to be that there were a couple of things recently that I ran into that it reminded me of just the notions of the things that you were talking about. So first of all, I'm going to try my screen share here, and somehow I'm not in the right tab. I thought I was sharing this entire window. Let me share this tab instead. There we go. Okay, now let's see if this works. Okay.
Okay, cool.
So first of all, in terms of the idea that you're talking about, which I'll just restate, was you said, for example, what if you could talk to the LEDs basically and ask them to create a certain animation? And
yeah,
so
like
ignoring
look like sunshine, or give me a moody color pattern. Like
So ignoring the AI part for now, this just was something really cool that I ran across the other day from people that are using Teensy in their projects.
Okay.
I just thought this was really cool and relevant to the discussion as a very early non-AI based concept that was worth looking at. So this was an installation for a hotel, I believe, in Florida, and just the description that you gave of like your thing was just an abstract example of something you wanted to be able to do, and this just really reminded me of what you described. I don't know if the video is working, but This is
No,
a
no, no. I
static.
mean, it's subtle, but yeah, right.
Yeah. So this
I
is
get what you're saying.
oh, this one might be better. This is a static piece of sculpture that is playing a video of some waves over the LEDs, and then it's also doing some other sort of magic to kind of enhance the twinkliness of the waves. But I just thought this was like when you said I want to do a wave animation. I know that was just like an abstract example, but I just saw this thing and I was like, oh wow, this is very similar to the concept that you were uh, the abstract example that you gave. Um,
Yeah. No, definitely. That's definitely in line with what I'm saying. Um,
but
I
now,
think, well, okay. So in looking at that, right, the way things are today, or they have been very recently, is that we have seen public art installations where the artist has had a large budget and put in some sort
months
of
of
some sort of sculptural LED display, which is then programmed
yeah,
beautifully by a team of really talented software engineers,
manually with
right?
trial and error over
Manually,
weeks. Yeah, yeah,
or months or years,
yeah.
right? And most artists don't have access to that kind of budget, or they don't know how to write the code,
Mhm.
or it's even a problem of like knowing what to ask for. Or I guess the last thing I really want to say, maybe one of the biggest problems, is let's say you had the budget, you had the project, you had the engineers. If you are an artist who isn't writing the code directly, or even if you are writing the code directly, the amount of time required to write the code and to get it to compile and to work kind of removes your ability to play with it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I really like about interacting with ChatGPT, or any of these various AI image generators, I don't always necessarily like the text results or the image results. It's not always perfect. What I like about it is that I can iterate, and that sometimes it surprises me. And so even if I then go on to change it myself, it's like I love being able to play with it. And so it takes what my entire career, basically, tech art has just been, it's been fun, it's interesting, but it's hard. I mean, it's really hard. It can be very expensive, and also the technology can just be so challenging, so demanding. Like getting your code to compile can be a nightmare, right? So it's so fun when you can just be like, let me try this, let me try this, let me try this, because that's what artists do and like to do, and it lets us be playful. So, yeah.
So this again, just another thing that this reminded me of is I'm sure you know Jay, who makes these amazing robots, and what you're describing is something he is working on right now. So I mean,
Cool.
he's an artist first. He's a trained artist who also happens to make robots, and he's a maker and has to harness whatever skills are necessary, and is completely capable of doing that with in order to kind of create his vision. But I know he was showing me a couple days ago his bot Digit. He's been working on kind of not exactly the conversational interface that you described. Let me see if this video has it. But he's been adding.
Hey, Digit, go forward.
There we go. Okay, cool. So he's been adding sort of voice commands to his
Yeah.
robot, which is not, and specifically what he showed me was that he's been saying, make the LED red, make the LED blue, make the LED green, which is
Okay. Yeah.
reminding me of a primitive version of kind of what you have in mind.
Yeah. Right.
But that is sort of like almost like wake word detection, as opposed to like an arbitrary phrase like do a new thing that you've never done before. It's more just like pick one of these three
Right.
colors. I told you you could say.
Right. Right.
So
And
just
have
another kind of
and
stepping stone.
yeah, the interpretive element, the creativity that can be really fun in in interacting with ChatGPT, asking it to write like a body sailor poem or whatever, and then, tweaking it and saying like, write it in iambic pentameter or whatever.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things are so fun to do. And I'm just wondering what other options you might have in mind,
Yeah.
or I guess like how soon could
Right.
artists have that kind of interface
Yeah.
with something like a Teensy or an Arduino that we could use in sculpture and in wearables?
Yeah. So when you described the problem, it was like, I haven't had a long time to think about it. I don't have the answer. Part of
Yeah,
what's cool about this is we can kind of explore the answer together and figure it out. So I was just kind of taking these stepping stones of like, here's a cool animation. This is how it's done today. It's completely manually mapped where someone has put a video into memory and is playing that video over LEDs. Here's another thing, a very simple AI based, voice recognition thing where it's doing something that you told it. But what you're talking about is, like several levels above, many levels above these, which is integrating a large language model into hardware so that it can execute a idea that wasn't pre-programmed. Like that video was pre-programmed. It's not going to make a sun animation. It's not going to make a leaves animation. It just does the water. And if you want to do a
right,
different one, they spend weeks changing it. Jay's
right.
robot, it can do like the LEDs, and apparently it can move around. But if he hasn't programmed it to wag its tail, then he can't just say, try wagging your tail, and it's going to know anything about what that means. So I think this idea that you're talking about, like I can see the pieces for it coming together, but I don't
Yeah,
quite know. I don't have the answer myself, but I can start to kind of put together some of the ideas. And like, if you have something like Dolly or something that is generating an image, then obviously you can say, I want this image, and it creates something that is on your screen that is that image. And there's also things like that for video and things like that now. So are LEDs just kind of like a display? So we could just
yeah,
have it, say, do this pattern. Like I can see, like, if we narrow it down to just like create some colors and some certain kind of textures or something like that, seems like a feasible step with what exists today, perhaps. I'm trying to
well,
yeah.
so I wanted to throw a couple things out there, just food for thought. I'm not saying this is the right way to go, but just some to push this.
That's all this is
Um,
today. This is just
yeah,
brainstorming. That's great.
yeah, exactly. So one thing that comes to mind is that the massive large language model, or like all of the information, the training information or whatever that maybe it needs to have access to, that's very processor intensive, the like massive NVIDIA server
Yeah.
territory. What if, for example, that did not exist on the artist's hardware locally, but the artist's hardware locally, if it's on Wi-Fi, could talk to that?
Yeah.
So that's one thought, like maybe to get it there sooner, just because like
Yes.
I'm thinking that having the whole huge, like super intelligent HAL, on your Arduino is probably going to take a minute. But what if, the Arduino, let's say, were enabled
Yeah.
to talk to HAL, and
So
say
yeah.
like, hey, let me hop on Wi-Fi and see like what Big Daddy
Yeah.
has to say about this, or Big Mama or whatever, right? So that's one thing, because that seems more realistic. And the next thing I wanted to say, just when you were talking about thinking about the LEDs as a display, I just want to push back a little bit on that. Like, so first of all, yes, that would be an obvious, is like for your LEDs, just like we do now, we say, okay, I have like, let's say 20 LEDs, and those LEDs are arranged in this pattern, like a 2x10 array, or a, whatever it is. Okay. So that's one way, but it doesn't have to be like that. You could also have 20 LEDs where you interact with AI to come up with a whole different way of conceiving of them. Like, what if each LED is thought of as being an expressive appendage? You wrote a model, or conceived of a model where the LED were thought of as being like a colorful flag that it can wave, or an eye,
Yeah.
a blinking eye.
So you just say,
Or
be excited, and it manifests excitement in its own
And I mean,
interpretation.
and I don't even know for like exactly what that would look like, but I think again, one of the things that's so exciting about AI, and especially where it meets hardware, is that what's really fun in art is to not have all the answers. It's to
Right.
throw the paint at the wall.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's absolutely so much to be said for skill and bringing it all together. I'm not in any way diminishing that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can combine skill with the ability to throw the paint at the wall, that's where you get by far the most interesting results, because there's an element of surprise and you often stumble across something that you never thought of before. And you're suddenly like, oh my God, look at that, right?
Yeah.
I also wanted to add that the reason AI is so compelling for a lot of artists, outside of just the fact that maybe I could just talk to it and have it write code for me instead of having to have that skill, which takes me out of the art mind often.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is just the idea of being able to have a relationship, a human. And when I say human, I mean, the machine is the machine, right? So
Yeah.
I don't think of the machine as being human, but a
Conversational.
a human
Yeah.
accessible relationship with an
Yeah.
intelligent machine, and then empowering the machine to have a personality, to have a memory, to have behavior, to have opinions, to have creativity. Because we hear a lot right now about how, for example, OpenAI or Google or Microsoft are taking XYZ steps to constrain the creativity or negativity or self-reflective capabilities of AI, because they don't want the answers from ChatGPT, for example, to frighten people. You
I
know, if
see.
you don't
Yeah.
want ChatGPT to get into having like some sinister, right? The
Yes.
ethics of it are real, and I have a lot of respect for that. So
In terms of
absolutely.
art, some
In terms
insane
of art
hallucination
though,
could be really cool.
exactly. In terms of art, where you're dealing with something that's localized, it's not being set free on the whole world. It's not a virus. It's just literally like here and under your control. In that case, it's oh my gosh, absolutely. You know, we want to push the limits and see like what's possible and what happens. And even though we may run into things where we're like, oh wow, gosh, my AI just said something kind of depressive and that's upsetting. I'm not promoting that in any way, but again, like art is very much about asking those questions and seeing where some of the risks exist, and not just trusting that corporations have like all of that under control. So the interactivity and the unexpected
Yeah.
outcome of the relationship that we have with the machine, like all of that. Oh my gosh, more, please. Okay, so let's get back to brass
I was
tacks.
gonna
Like,
say, going back to your very first thing that you were saying in
yeah,
terms of off device, cloud compute being leveraged. Obviously, that right now
okay.
that's what you'd have to do. Like most of the stuff that I'm interested in is like keeping it on the machine. I think I like the privacy aspect. I like not having to be reliant on on an internet connection or on something that I don't control or don't necessarily know what their motives are and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, everything that you're describing, my nature is to continually try and like distill it into like pieces of like, well, how can we make that work practically and stuff like that. So that's why I'm like going into all these like, I'm kind of minimizing and simplifying and stuff. So when I said about like the LED as a monitor, I was just like, we could do a thing like what you're saying today if we had an API like a DALL-E type thing where you just say, you give it your prompt and then it sends you back an image, and then you downsample that image from 1024 by 768 to 20 by 20 or whatever on an LED. So I was like that seems like we could try that, and we could like
Or
put that
even
out
just
in the
ask
next
it
month
like,
as like this. Yeah.
you could ask it like, what show me the weather in New York, and maybe
Hmm.
it goes and it figures it out, and it comes back, and your display either turns like some shade of blue or gray or
Hmm.
yellow as an interpretation of the weather conditions, just as an example, but something simple to get
Yeah.
started.
So I have this little display right here. It's I think 128 by 64 pixels. And I mean,
Okay.
it's doing something kind of cool right now. Okay, right now it's switched to like a picture of a synthesizer. But the kind of swirly thing that was happening just before that, like it'd be quite easy to create something where it goes out to an API, generates an image, and then displays it on there. It's just like it's version 0.0001 of your idea is like,
Yeah.
that's the most basic thing that is attainable today that I feel like I could knock out in a week or two, and we could have like by the next stream. That's not a promise. I'm just saying it's a
Okay,
conceivable
well, I
thing.
mean, that would be really cool. I would just say, like, as a caveat,
I
that
know.
it would be like especially amazing if the way that we implement it gives us the ability to grow in the direction of not just doing the literal kind of
Yeah.
expected thing of go get an image, bring it back,
Yeah.
but that we could then start to do things like go form an opinion of something,
Right.
go right,
So
um, go
you're
go expand your mind, or discover something, or adapt your personality, or meet new friends and come back and do XYZ to show me what that looks like. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I do. So again, I'm just trying to distill your ideas into like what I think are practical things that are achievable. And the one I just described was like the most pathetic thing that vaguely mimics your idea.
It's
And
not
now what I'm thinking
pathetic.
is,
It's not
do you remember
pathetic.
like
I'm just saying, like, it's not pathetic, and I know we have to start easy. What
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
saying, though, is that just be mindful, or keep in the back of your
yeah,
mind, that what's most interesting about
yeah,
AI is that it feels alive. And so we
yeah.
want to do as much as we can to cultivate that idea that it has an intelligent agency.
Yeah, so that was my idea, that is like the most simple, vague representation of the thing you expressed. My next idea is because I'm thinking there's this notion of being able to do arbitrary stuff as opposed to like the thing I said with Jay's thing, where it's pretty much just like it can do stuff and AI can do stuff, and he's like plumbing in between those things to create a little bridge that lets you do stuff.
Okay.
Um, but so now what I'm thinking is, do you remember like several decades ago when genetic algorithms were like the new hot thing? And it
Yeah.
was like a computer could do something that you didn't design it to do, because you
Yeah.
started off with a genetic algorithm, and then
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
starts mutating and doing weird stuff. And probably it ends up like crashing and burning. But like just before that, it might do something really cool. So now
Yeah.
I'm thinking, what if, because one thing, I'm just trying to take blocks of feasible existent stuff that you could leverage to do something vaguely similar to your ultimate vision over here. So what if you can ask ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever to write Arduino code for you. And
Right.
so what about just adding the conversational interface, the ability to execute, to compile and execute, or I don't know. Yeah. So I was going to say compile and execute, but forget C++. Let's make it MicroPython. So now we have a conversational interface using MicroPython and reprogramming itself to execute stuff, stuff, literally just stuff. So
Okay,
you
so
say,
what I hear you saying is that I could have a piece of hardware
yeah,
that's enabled to talk to some portal
something capable of
computer, right,
generating
that
code.
is
Yeah.
able to interact with, let's say, OpenAI.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that OpenAI, then, with all of its abilities, is writing code
Yeah.
that is then being transmitted back to my local hardware.
And
And
then
as a result, I'm seeing my LEDs illuminated in a generative AI way.
yeah. So day one, I feel like it's conceivable that you can make a system where you say, I have an LED on pin 13. I would like you to write code to blink that LED once a second. And then it would
Mhm.
generate that code, and then it would blink that LED once a second,
Yeah,
and then you've done something. And
right.
then I feel like it's conceivably possible that you could describe the hardware and have it write code that may execute correctly and then execute that code.
It may.
May.
I
That's why I
tried
said
it.
may. Yeah.
I tried it for my LED strap
Yeah.
and for Pixel Blaze. And it
Yeah.
was interesting because I put the Pixel Blaze code into ChatGPT and it was able to, I mean, it knew what language it was written in. It was able to kind of figure out the code structure. It was able to write code that compiled
Yeah.
on my Pixel Blaze and ran,
Yeah.
but it never did anything interesting. It never did anything. It basically didn't work. But so on the one hand, it was incredible for how well it did work.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it was a little bit disappointing for what it couldn't do. But I think that probably ChatGPT is not the best option there, right? Because there are other, what are I'm forgetting right now on GitHub.
Like GitHub Copilot?
Yes, exactly. So I think Copilot,
Yeah.
from what I understand, would be a much better.
The other thing that I would say is I feel like Pixel Blaze in particular was a more challenging place to start because Pixel Blaze's code is a sort of proprietary JavaScript-like language, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you chose Arduino, there's a lot more C++ code out there. Or if you chose MicroPython, there's a lot more Python code out there. There's a lot more MicroPython code out there. It's not as ubiquitous as
Well,
Python.
okay. So now that you mention that, though, I mean, the reason I'm using Pixel Blaze is because it has, such a wonderful interface already for me to interact with, right? I have the hardware and the software interface that I can see the code and interact with it. So for me, it was just a matter of then using AI to help me take advantage of that. But if I'm using an Arduino, if I hooked it up to a strand of, let's say, 100 LEDs right now, for me to get that Arduino to do anything interesting, even remotely related to the like subtle color gradation and the, gamma correction and all of that, like that's, a ton of work. Like, could AI do that for me?
Exactly. So Pixel Blaze is already along the arc of like, here's a hardcore engineer, embedded engineer, and here's an artist trying to make something beautiful. Like Pixel Blaze is already a fair way along that line because it's designed more to be more accessible to artists and
which is great.
So I'm saying, but I just meant in terms of whatever your thing is that you use is trained on. Chances are it doesn't know Pixel Blaze code at all and is trying to do something like JavaScript that may or may not have worked, or maybe it does know a little bit of Pixel Blaze, but there's no chance it's as good as Pixel Blaze as it is at C++. So here's what I'm thinking.
But David, does it know how to animate multicolored LEDs with a smooth gradient? I don't know.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying is I think that's conceivable, and we're somehow at the 28-minute mark, so I'm not going to suggest it today, but maybe our next session is I almost like have the stuff that I would need around here just to be able to grab and do this, but not quite, and we're almost out of time. But I think that conceivably we could do a very, sort of duct tape together version of what we're talking about on our next stream, where we take an Arduino and we try and get some code written for it and we try and get it animated because, again, I think it's going to require a lot of domain knowledge from us. We're going to have to say, we have this many WS2812 pixels. We're using I squared C. We're going to have to say all these like specific things, but it might be able to get close to writing some code and it might be able to get close to doing some sort of animations with us really spoon feeding it.
I really like your suggestion. And the reason is that we can get an Arduino, we can get the LEDs, and we can use Copilot to just write code to see, can AI write code for the Arduino to do an animated color gradient? Can it? I don't know. And if so, like, how hard is it to ask it to do that? Because if it can't do that at all, then that's, you're right though. Like, that's a good place to start. Like,
because the
how
Arduino,
well AI can help us write code.
there's the Arduino or whatever the board is.
Yeah,
it's going
whatever the board,
that's going to have the I/O on it that does the LED animations, and then separately, I would say there'd be a Raspberry Pi, some other, NVIDIA Jetson, something. There's something a little bit more beefier, like a single board computer, and that's doing like the so you'd be talking into the single board computer, and then the single board computer would either be literally compiling and flashing the Arduino so that it can do its animation, or if it's MicroPython or whatever, then obviously it's just transmitting it and interpreting on the Arduino. But like, I think we have like a thing that is at least something we can try and see where it goes on the next stream, and it's not
awesome.
close to your end vision, but like all the pieces are there in a pretty cool way.
Yeah. Well, again, just to reiterate, I think it's very smart to say, let's start with hardware that's pervasive and easy for us to get our hands on, and that we know, and see whether or not we can use AI in whatever form is accessible to us to write code to animate LEDs. Let's just see if we can do that, because if we can, then wow, okay, let's see where we go from there.
I'm fairly confident, having never done this at all. This feels achievable.
Okay.
Maybe we'll need more than half an hour next time.
Okay.
So maybe we could like
I'm so
plan an hour
excited.
stream or something for hands-on time. But I feel like it's interesting place to start.
Oh my gosh, this is very exciting. I would be so excited. I just want it to write my code for me. I don't want to write code anymore.
We're almost at the 32-minute mark though, so we should probably all
right, cool
it.
Yeah.
No, I can never do it right.
That's okay, I'll just do it for you.
See you next time.
All right, bye.